The first time Raul saw stop 19, there was already someone standing there. That was what froze him. Not the fact that the stop had never existed before. Not the way it stood between two blocks of cracked concrete wall where there should have been nothing but an abandoned service road and a dead-end fence. Not even the sign itself, an old metal pole with a square marker bolted to it, its route number painted in a style the city hadn't used in at least 20 years. It was the passenger. A woman in a pale blouse stood beneath the sign with her hands folded neatly in front of her, as if she had been waiting a very long time and had no doubt the bus would come. Rain streaked the windshield. The wipers dragged back and forth with a tired rubber groan. Raul tightened his hands on the steering wheel and leaned forward, squinting through the midnight blur of Mexico City. That stop was not on his route. It was not on any route. And yet there it was, lit by a weak yellow street lamp that hadn't been there the night before. The woman raised one hand, not waving, just lifting it slow and deliberate, like someone signaling from underwater. Behind her, in the narrow alley beyond the curb, several other figures stood in total darkness, waiting. Welcome back to the channel. Tonight's story will take you deep into the sleepless arteries of Mexico City, where headlights cut through rain-empty streets, open in the wrong places, and some passengers do not belong on any route map ever printed. Before we go any further, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from tonight? And if true horror stories are your kind of ride, make sure you like, subscribe, and leave a comment, because this one only gets worse after midnight. Raul did what any sane driver would do. He kept going. But in the rearview mirror, as the bus pulled away, he saw the woman still standing under the sign. And then she smiled, not at him, at something already sitting in the back of his bus. Raul Ortega had been driving buses in Mexico City for 11 years, long enough to know that the city changed faces after dark. By day, his route was noisy, annoyed human. He carried office workers, school kids, market vendors with plastic crates, exhausted mothers balancing grocery bags, old men who argued about politics and soccer like either one might still save them. The bus smelled of diesel damp fabric, hot metal, cheap cologne, fried food wrapped in paper, and sometimes the sharp medicinal sting of floor cleaner if the depot had been in a generous mood. By night, everything thinned out. The city was still alive. Mexico City was always alive, but it became stranger after midnight. The traffic loosened. Neon reflected off wet pavement. Music drifted from bars and apartment windows in broken pieces. Dogs crossed streets with the confidence of locals. People waiting at stops stood farther back from the curb and avoided eye contact. The city's noise didn't disappear. It just changed shape. Raul preferred the night shift. It paid a little more, and the streets made more sense to him when fewer people were lying. During the day, everyone rushed, complained, pushed invented stories to excuse themselves. At night, people showed what they were: tired, drunk, heartbroken, lost, desperate to get home, or desperate not to. He understood those people. At 42, Raul lived alone in a narrow apartment in Iztapalapa, with yellowing walls, a refrigerator that groaned like an animal in its sleep, and a television he mostly used for the noise. His ex-wife had moved to Puebla years ago with her new husband. His daughter Lucia was 19 and studying nursing. She still called him every Sunday afternoon, always asking if he was eating properly, as if she were the parent. Raul loved her with a kind of quiet, permanent ache. His life moved by routine. Up at 4 in the afternoon. Coffee so strong it made his chest warm. Shower, clean shirt, work boots. Short bus ride to the depot. Sign in. Pre-trip inspection. Check lights, mirrors, ticket machine, brakes. A nod to whatever mechanic looked least miserable. Then out into the city, following the same route so many times that half the turns lived in his body, more than in his memory. He was not a superstitious man, though he had grown up around enough superstition to recognize its smell. His mother had believed in shadows that lingered in doorways, in mirrors that should be covered after death, in roads that should not be taken if a dog refused to cross first. Raul had spent most of his life rolling his eyes at that kind of thing. Bad luck to him was unpaid bills. Tragedy was a drunk driver. Horror was a hospital waiting room. Still, even he had rules. He did not look too long at people sitting alone in the very back of the bus after 2 a.m. He did not stop for anyone standing where there was no marked stop, no matter how frantic they looked. And on the stretch of road near the old irrigation canal between a shuttered print shop and a concrete wall covered in murals so faded the faces looked skinned. He never opened the doors unless someone on the bus requested it first. He had not invented that last rule. It came from Martin, an older driver with nicotine fingers and a glass eye that never seemed aimed at the same place as the real one. Martin said that years ago, before Raul had joined the line, one of their drivers stopped there around 1:30 in the morning because he saw a little boy in a school uniform crying by the curb. The next morning, they found the bus parked 3 neighborhoods away with the engine still running. Empty. No driver, no passengers. Only a small wet footprint near the rear exit, as if someone with bare feet had stepped through mud and walked off into the aisle. Raul didn't believe that story. Not exactly. But he also never tested it. By the end of October, the rainy season had not fully let go of the city. Nights came wet and cold enough to creep into the joints. The windows fogged if the heater stayed too low. Headlights smeared themselves over puddles and potholes. Street corners looked deeper than they should. That week, Raul began to notice little things. Passengers pulling the stop cord between official stops, then seeming confused when he opened the doors. An old woman insisting she had boarded with her sister, though she had gotten on alone. A teenage boy asking very casually whether Raul had started seeing the extra stop yet. Raul had told him to sit down or get off. The boy had smiled without humor and moved to the back. Then there were the route maps. Each bus carried a laminated city transit map behind the driver's barrier, more for decoration than use. Most passengers knew where they were going or were too proud to ask. On Tuesday, while Raul waited at a red light, he glanced at the map and felt a brief, unpleasant hitch in his chest. There was a red dot between stops 18 and 20. No label, just a dot. He looked again at the road, looked back. The dot was gone. Raul told himself he was tired. But that same night, while wiping down the windshield at the terminal, he noticed something scratched into the bus's outer panel near the folding doors. At first, he thought it was vandalism. Then he leaned closer. 19, not painted, not keyed casually. Cut deep into the metal as though someone had carved it carefully with the point of a knife. He rubbed his thumb over it and found the groove sharp enough to sting. When he mentioned it to the depot supervisor, the man shrugged and blamed kids. When he mentioned the strange extra stop to Martin, the old driver stared at him longer than Raul liked, then asked, "What time did you see the sign?" "I didn't say I saw a sign." Martin lit a cigarette near the loading bay and exhaled without taking his eyes off Raul. "What time?" Raul felt irritated at once. "I'm not playing this game." Martin nodded as if that confirmed something. "When it appears, don't open the doors." Raul barked a laugh. "When what appears?" But Martin had already turned away. The city kept moving. Raul kept driving, and for 3 more nights, nothing happened. Then came Thursday. A storm rolled over the eastern districts after midnight, heavy and low, turning avenues into mirrors and side streets, into black channels of reflected light. Raul was on his final loop, tired enough that his shoulders felt packed with sand. The bus was half empty. 2 construction workers asleep with their helmets on their laps. A woman humming softly over a sleeping child. A college-aged man with earbuds staring at rain as if expecting it to answer him. No one difficult, no one drunk. The road by the canal should have been empty. Instead, under a weak yellow lamp that should not have existed, Raul saw a bus stop sign where bare wall had always been. "Stop, my nana." The number was faded black on white metal, and beneath it stood a woman in a pale blouse, motionless in the rain, waiting with impossible patience. Raul's stomach turned cold. Something was wrong with the space around her. The curb looked stretched. The alley behind her seemed longer than the city block allowed, descending into a darkness too complete to belong under any streetlight. And behind the woman, several tall shapes stood without moving, watching the bus, watching him. Raul drove past. His pulse slammed in his throat, but he did not break, did not open the doors, did not even glance fully at the sign again. He focused on the lane line, the watery red glow of taillights ahead, the wet whisper of the tires. Then he looked up into the mirror. The back row was no longer empty. Someone was sitting there. At first, Raul thought one of the sleeping construction workers had moved. Then the bus passed under a brighter light, and he saw the shape clearly in the overhead mirror. A woman seated all the way in the last row, directly in the center, hands folded in her lap. Pale blouse, dark wet hair, head tilted slightly down as if she were listening to something in the floor. Raul's hand slipped on the wheel. He checked the side mirror, then the aisle mirror again. None of the passengers seemed to notice her. The college student still stared out the window. The mother rocked her child. One construction worker snored into his shoulder. There had been no stop, no door opening, no one had boarded. He told himself he was mistaken. Reflection, light distortion, tired eyes. Then the woman lifted her face in the mirror. Her eyes were closed, not squeezed shut, just sealed smooth and blank, as if there had never been lids to open in the first place. Raul hit the brakes harder than he meant to. The construction workers jerked awake. The college student yanked out one earbud and cursed. The child started crying. "Sorry," Raul said automatically. "Pothole." His voice sounded thin. He forced himself to turn around. The back row was empty. Every seat between there and the middle doors was empty too. The bus smelled suddenly wrong, not diesel and wet clothes, but a stale underground odor like water trapped for years beneath concrete. Something mineral, something old enough to forget sunlight. Raul reached the next official stop and opened the doors with more relief than he wanted to admit. The construction workers got off muttering. The woman with the child hurried after them. That left only the college student near the back. As the doors hissed shut, the student stood and approached the front. "Driver," he said quietly, "don't take Canal Viejo tonight." Raul looked at him. The kid was maybe 20, thin, damp-haired, with hollow shadows under his eyes. "That's the route." The student glanced toward the darkened aisle. Not after one. Raul felt annoyance flare, partly because it was easier than fear. Either sit down or get off. The student swallowed. For a moment, he looked like he wanted to say something else. Then he stepped backward toward the doors. "Did you see the sign?" he asked. Raul said nothing. The student nodded once, almost sadly. "Then she saw you too." He got off into the rain. Raul shut the door so fast the rubber seals slapped. He considered calling dispatch, but what would he say? There was a woman who maybe wasn't there, and a bus stop that shouldn't exist. The depot already treated night drivers like they were half crazy from fumes and lack of sleep. He could hear their laughter before he even picked up the radio. So he kept driving. For 6 blocks, nothing unusual happened. Then the stop request bell dinged. Raul flinched. No one was on the bus. He checked the mirrors anyway. Empty seats, wet smears on the windows. The aisle dim under tired fluorescent lights. Ding. Another request. This one from the rear. Raul slowed but did not stop. No. His own voice startled him. Ding. 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 The bell began sounding in steady intervals, not frantic, not impatient. Precise. As if one careful finger were pressing the strip, letting go, and pressing again. Raul's scalp prickled. At the next red light, he did something he would later hate himself for doing. He stood up. The empty bus rocked gently around him while rain ticked on the roof. He walked halfway down the aisle, staring at the red stop request light glowing above the rear doors. No one. The bell stopped. Raul stood listening to the bus breathe through its vents. Water hissed under the tires outside. Somewhere far off, a siren moved through another neighborhood. He waited until the light turned green, then returned to the driver's seat. As he pulled forward, something softly tapped the glass partition beside his head. 3 taps. From inside the barrier, Raul slammed one hand against the brake and twisted around. No one. But on the glass at eye level, a small wet handprint slowly slid downward. Not the size of an adult's, a child's. The handprint left a gray-black trail that smelled like stagnant water. Raul stared at it until headlights behind him flashed and a horn blared. He lurched the bus forward, heart pounding so hard he felt sick. He finished the route in a haze. At the terminal, he parked under floodlights and sat in the driver's seat with the engine idling, unwilling to turn around. Eventually, he forced himself to inspect the bus. The child's handprint was gone from the partition, but the back row was wet. Not from rain, blown in through an open door. Wet in a concentrated oval, as though someone had sat there for a long time in soaked clothing. The cushion was cold to the touch, shockingly cold like fabric laid over ice. And on the floor beneath the seat lay an old transit token, the kind the city had stopped using before Raul ever got hired. One side bore the faded seal of the transit authority. The other side had a number stamped into it. 19. He went home just after dawn, showered, and still could not get warm. That afternoon, Lucia called while he sat at his kitchen table staring at the token. "You sound tired," she said. "Night shift. You always say that when you don't want to tell me something." Raul smiled despite himself. "I'm fine." She filled the silence with stories from school, an anatomy exam, a professor with nicotine stains on 2 fingers, a classmate who fainted during blood draw practice. Raul listened, grateful for the normalcy. He almost told her about the stop. He almost asked if she had ever heard old stories about disappearing routes, phantom passengers, anything like that. But Lucia worried easily, and there was nothing she could do from across the city except lose sleep over it. Before hanging up, she said, "Dad, be careful going home. There was some accident near the canal road last month. People online said that stretch is cursed." Raul nearly dropped the token. "Who said that?" "People say everything online," she replied lightly. "Why?" "No reason." After the call, he searched local forums and old neighborhood groups on his phone. Most of it was nonsense rumors, chain posts, urban legends. But one thread from 2 years earlier mentioned a bus accident from the late 1990s. Night route. Heavy rain. Driver swore he stopped for passengers at an unmarked corner. Bus later found crashed against an underpass barrier with no bodies inside except the drivers. The comments argued over the details. Some said the passengers had been illegal riders who fled. Some said the driver had been drunk. Some said the official records were sealed because a child had disappeared from the bus. One commenter posted a grainy newspaper clipping. The photo was too blurred to make out much, but Raul could see the route placard hanging crooked in the windshield. The number looked like 19. That night, Raul considered calling in sick. He even sat on the edge of his bed in his uniform, staring at the depot number on his phone. But sick days were money, and money was rent, repairs, medicine, tuition, help for Lucia when she needed it. He had endured food poisoning fever and 2 broken ribs without missing more than 1 shift each. He was not about to let a story, because that was all. It was a story take food off his daughter's table. At the depot, he found Martine drinking coffee beside Bay 4. Raul showed him the token without a word. Martine's face changed. The old man did not touch it. "Where'd you get that?" "In the back row." "Throw it away." "It came from my bus." "Then throw the whole bus away." Raul fought the urge to grab him by the shirt. "Talk to me." Martine studied the token, then looked toward the line of idling vehicles. Years ago, before electronic cards, there was a route workers called the Candle Line. Not official, just a nickname. It ran late, mostly industrial zones, outskirts, bad roads. Drivers said there was a stop that moved. Some nights it wasn't there. Some nights it was. If you opened the doors there, people got on. Quiet people, wet people. They never paid, and they never got off where they should. Raul kept still. They always requested, "Stop 19, Martine continued. But there wasn't one on the map. And drivers started disappearing. "That's a story." Martine shrugged. "Everything becomes a story if enough time passes. What really happened?" The old man's expression thinned. "My brother drove nights. He picked up 2 women and a boy at that stop in 1998. He came home at dawn with a bite mark on his arm and mud packed inside his shoes. He said the passengers kept asking why he wouldn't let the others board." Raul felt a pressure in his chest. "What others?" Martine crushed his paper cup. "He quit the next day. 3 weeks later, he threw himself in front of a metro train. The depot speaker crackled, calling departures. Martine started away, then stopped. "If you see, stop 19 again. Don't look at the people behind the first one." Raul watched him go. For the first time in years, he did not want to get behind the wheel. The city seemed to sense his fear. Every shadow looked arranged. Every puddle reflected too much darkness. Passengers boarded with damp faces and unreadable eyes. Raul kept expecting one of them to hand him an old transit token or ask for "Stop 19" in a voice full of river water. Instead, the first part of the shift passed normally enough to be almost insulting. He picked up nurses, laborers, teenagers sharing earbuds, a man carrying a cake box at chest level like something holy. Traffic was light. Rain came and went. At 12:40 a.m., a middle-aged woman thanked him for waiting while she ran for the stop. At 12:57, a drunk man tried to argue over fare and lost interest halfway through his own sentence. Raul began to feel foolish. By 1:12, he turned onto the canal road. His spine tightened so fast it hurt. The stretch was long and poorly lit, bordered on one side by old industrial lots, and on the other by a wall hiding the drainage channel beyond. Murals peeled from the concrete in long strips. A broken billboard frame rose against the sky like black ribs. No stop sign, no yellow lamp. Raul exhaled. He made it halfway down the block before the interior lights flickered. Once, twice, then steadied. He checked the instrument panel. Voltage normal. Engine fine. In the rearview mirror, every passenger on the bus had turned to look out the right side windows. Not one of them spoke. Raul followed their gaze. At first, he saw only wet wall and rain. Then, a rectangular section of darkness detached from the concrete and sharpened into the shape of an opening, an alley impossibly narrow where there should have been solid wall. A yellow street lamp brightened above it, as if being remembered into existence. And beneath that lamp stood the stop. Stop 19. This time, there were more people waiting. The woman in the pale blouse stood closest to the curb. Behind her, dim within the alley's black throat, Raul saw perhaps a dozen silhouettes. Men, women, one smaller shape that might have been a child. Their clothes clung wetly. Their heads were angled toward the bus in perfect stillness. A passenger near the middle rose from his seat. Raul hadn't even noticed the man board. He wore a gray suit darkened at the shoulders as if from old rain. His face was ordinary enough except for how deeply tired it looked, the kind of exhaustion that made age impossible to judge. "Don't stop," the man said. The words were quiet, but everyone on the bus heard them, because at once each passenger turned away from the window and looked at Raul, not annoyed, not frightened. Expectant, Raul's foot hovered over the brake. The bus's automated stop announcement crackled to life through static, though no stop had been requested. A soft female voice filled the bus. "Next stop, 19. The speakers hissed. Then in English, "Next stop, 90. Raul slammed his hand against the announcement panel until the voice cut out. "Sit down," he snapped, not looking away from the road. The suited man remained standing near the front rail. "If you open the doors, they'll think you invited them." Raul felt his throat dry out. "Who are you?" "A rider who missed his stop." The answer was so absurd, Raul nearly laughed. Instead, he pressed harder on the accelerator. As the bus passed stop 19, the woman beneath the sign turned her head and followed him with that same patient, almost tender smile. Then every figure behind her lifted one arm at the same time, not to wave, to signal that they wanted to board. The stop request bell screamed from the rear. Raul jolted and looked in the mirror. A child was standing in the aisle. The boy wore a dark school sweater and knee socks, soaked black with water. His hair clung in strings to his forehead. One side of his face looked badly bruised or rotten in the dim light. Raul could not tell which. The boy held the stop cord in one small hand and smiled with lips too colorless to be alive. "Ding, ding, ding." "No," Raul whispered. The boy's mouth moved. At first, Raul heard nothing. Then a voice came not from the child, but from the speakers overhead, whisper soft and full of static. "You passed us." Passengers began to murmur. A woman near the middle clutched her bag to her chest and asked if there was a problem. Someone laughed nervously. The normal spell of the ride was breaking, and that terrified Raul more than if everyone had stayed silent. He looked back toward the suited man. Gone. Only an empty standing space near the rail. The child in the aisle was also gone. But the stop bell continued sounding every few seconds as Raul drove. At the next official stop, 3 passengers got off in a hurry without meeting his eyes. One elderly man paused at the doors and asked, "Why are you still running this route?" Raul stared. "What?" But the man had already stepped into the rain. The remaining riders clustered closer to the front without seeming aware they were doing it. The back half of the bus sat empty and dim, every seat glistening faintly as though damp. Then came the smell again, that old subterranean odor like wet stone and sealed air from below the city. It spread gradually through the aisle. Passengers wrinkled their noses. A young woman covered her mouth with her sleeve. One little girl, no more than 7, tugged her mother's coat and said clearly, "Mama, the wet people are coming in." Her mother shushed her, at once embarrassed. Raul drove faster than regulations allowed. At 1:26 a.m., the bus's GPS screen went blank. At 1:28, his radio filled with a grinding hum, then fragments of voices speaking too rapidly to understand. One voice rose above the others, a man's voice, desperate and distant. "Do not let them stand behind you." Static swallowed it. At 1:31, Raul missed a turn he had taken thousands of times. It should have been impossible. The intersection was broad and familiar, but when he looked up, the road markings were wrong. The storefronts had changed. The bus was moving through a district he did not recognize, older facades, shuttered windows, balconies with rusted ironwork, all washed in yellow sodium light. No other cars, no pedestrians, no sound except rain and engine. One of the passengers approached the front and said, "Driver, where are we?" Raul had no answer. He slowed at the next intersection and saw 3 bus stop signs in a row on the corner. All of them marked 19. Beneath each sign stood a small group of waiting figures. His chest constricted. He accelerated again. The passengers began shouting over one another. "This isn't Insurgentes. Open the doors. Let me off." The stop request bell became constant, shrill, unbroken. Raul gripped the wheel so hard his fingers cramped. "Sit down." A hard thud came from the roof. Then another. Something was moving across the top of the bus on all fours, fast and uneven, skittering from front to back with a wet scraping sound. Passengers screamed. Someone dropped to the floor. Raul flinched as a damp bulge pressed briefly inward above the windshield, as if a body lay spread over the roof panel directly above his head. 2 gray hands slapped flat against the outside of the windshield. Small hands, child-sized. They dragged downward, leaving muddy streaks that did not wash away in the rain. Raul shouted a curse and swerved. The bus lurched. Passengers cried out and grabbed poles. He nearly clipped a parked delivery truck that appeared out of nowhere on the narrow street. Then, just as suddenly, the city shifted back. He was on the canal road again. The familiar wall, the dead billboard frame, the drainage smell from beyond the concrete. His bus was stopped, engine idling, doors closed, and directly ahead, 20 yards in front of the bumper, stood Stop 19. He did not remember braking. The woman in the pale blouse waited beneath the sign. This time she was not smiling. The line of figures behind her filled the alley all the way into the dark. Raul could make out faces now pale rain slick, still as masks. Some were swollen by water. Some seemed injured in ways that made no sense. Bent necks, flattened features, mouths torn wider than bone would allow. One man wore a transit uniform from decades ago, with half his jaw hanging loose against his collar. A child stood at the front beside the woman, the same boy from the aisle. He raised one hand and pointed not at Raul, but to the folding doors, requesting entry. The passengers on the bus had gone utterly silent. Raul did not turn around, but he could feel them all staring through the windshield. Then a voice spoke directly behind his shoulder. "You already took some of us." Raul nearly came out of the seat. In the reflection of the side glass, he saw the suited man standing just inside the driver barrier. Rainwater dripped from the man's sleeves, though he had not boarded wet. His eyes were bloodshot and feverishly clear. "What do you want?" Raul whispered. The man looked past him at the waiting stop. "They think every bus after one belongs to them." "Who are they?" "Those who were left between stops." Raul's mouth had gone dry. "That means nothing." "It will." The woman at the curb lifted her face. Even from that distance, Raul could see that her eyes were smooth shut, lidless, and pale. Her lips parted. Every speaker in the bus crackled on. Raul opened the door. His blood turned to ice. He had never told anyone on the route his name. Passengers began sobbing. One man rushed forward and hit the emergency release by the rear exit. The doors twitched but did not open. Locked. Sealed. The bus lights dimmed to a jaundiced yellow. In the mirror, Raul saw shapes taking seats in the empty back rows, not boarding through doors, not appearing all at once, but slowly resolving from the darkness, as if they had always been there, and only now were becoming visible. Wet passengers, heads bowed, hands folded in their laps. One lifted her face, a pale blouse. Another had half a scalp missing. Another wore a school sweater. Another looked like a transit driver in a mold-stained jacket, his neck bent sharply to one side. They sat quietly, row by row, filling from the rear toward the middle, while the living passengers pressed toward the front, trembling and crying out prayers. The suited man said drive. Raul did. He jammed the bus into gear and hit the accelerator so violently the tires spun on wet pavement. The bus surged forward. For one horrible second, he thought the woman under the sign would not move, that he would feel the impact and carry her body under the wheels. Instead, the bus passed through the stop like it was made of rain. The sign bent backward without breaking. The waiting figures rippled, distorted, and then seemed to rush alongside the bus in the windows, running, gliding, keeping pace impossibly fast. Faces knocked softly against the glass. A child's palm flattened against the rear side window and stayed there as if attached. The passengers screamed. Raul kept his eyes on the road, jaw locked so tightly it hurt. At the next intersection, every traffic light turned red at once. He blew through them. A delivery van missed his side by inches, horn blaring. The suited man braced a hand against the barrier but never lost balance. "You can't outrun a stop." Raul wanted to hit him. Then help me. I am. How? The man looked at him with miserable patience. I'm still asking for my ride. Raul stared. Then memory shifted inside him. 3 months earlier, just before dawn, he had nearly finished a stormy shift when a man in a gray suit flagged him down between official stops. Raul had almost passed him, but the man looked ill, so he opened the doors. The passenger, boarded soaking wet, thanked him and sat midway back. 2 blocks later, when Raul checked the mirror, the seat was empty. He had assumed the man slipped off at the rear exit during a crowd surge. Now, the suited man said softly, "You left me where the routes overlap." Raul's stomach turned. "Stop 19 doesn't just appear," the man continued. "It remembers." The bus lights flickered again. This time, when they returned, every living passenger had vanished. Only the dead remained, row after row of silent, wet figures facing forward. Raul shouted and nearly lost the bus. Then the suited man put a hand on his shoulder, cold, solid, human enough to be worse than a ghost. "Keep driving," he said. "If you stop before the bridge, they'll open the doors themselves." Ahead through the rain, Raul saw the overpass bridge spanning the canal road. On any normal night, it was just another ugly concrete structure stained by leaks and graffiti. Tonight, beneath it, he saw a crowd. Dozens of waiting figures packed shoulder to shoulder in darkness, filling the service lane beneath the bridge supports. And in their midst, bolted to a pillar in fresh white paint, a sign read, "Stop. 19 Terminal." Raul understood then that the stop was not one place. It was moving toward him, trying to become the end of the route. He drove straight at the bridge. The dead passengers in the bus slowly turned their heads toward him in unison. Their mouths opened. A low, wet inhalation filled the aisle as though all of them were smelling him. The suited man leaned close. "Don't let them think you've arrived." "What does that mean?" But the man's grip tightened painfully on Raul's shoulder, and he pointed to the dashboard. The route display at the front of the bus had changed. Instead of the correct line number, it now read 19. Something in Raul broke free then, not sanity exactly, but the last obedient part of himself that still believed rules would save him. He reached over the steering column and ripped open the maintenance compartment beneath the dash. Inside, beside spare fuses and rags, was the heavy emergency flare the depot required on all buses, but almost nobody ever used. His hand found it by touch. The bus roared towards the bridge. Outside, the crowd beneath the overpass did not move aside. They simply waited in dense silence, filling both lanes and the service shoulder. The yellow sign marked Terminal gleamed with rain. Behind Raul, the dead passengers rose from their seats. He heard them stand all at once, the soft drag of wet clothes, the creak of suspension, the slight sticky sound of hands releasing vinyl. He did not look back. He could feel them now, the pressure of their attention pushing toward the front. The suited man said, "They want the driver most." Raul snarled, "You could have mentioned that sooner. You wouldn't have listened sooner." The windshield fogged from the inside, not with warmth, but with an icy film that spread like breath from dozens of mouths. Shapes pressed against the side windows from outside as the bus neared the bridge. Faces surfaced in the glass, pale and dripping, then slid away. Raul yanked the flare free and struck the cap against the dash. For one dead second, nothing happened. Then, red fire erupted in his fist with a violent hiss, filling the driver's area with crimson light and the choking smell of burning chemicals. The bus's interior changed. All the wet figures in the aisle and seats recoiled at once, not with dramatic shrieks or monstrous violence, but with a deeply human flinch, as if light itself pained them. Their skin, where the flare lit it, looked waterlogged and translucent. Some had no eyes. Some had too many teeth. One child's lower half simply ended at the thighs, the rest dissolving into streaming black water that soaked the aisle and vanished before reaching the front. The suited man stepped back from the flare's light, but did not disappear. Raul drove one-handed and held the screaming red flare out over the fare box with the other. "Move!" he shouted at the windshield, at the crowd at the city, at whatever had been waiting between routes all these years. The figures beneath the bridge shuddered like reflections hit by a thrown stone. Gaps opened in the mass narrow as shoulders. Not enough. Raul saw the concrete support coming, saw the terminal sign, saw the woman in the pale blouse standing directly in the lane, rain pouring over her blind face. She opened her mouth impossibly wide, and from every speaker in the bus came the voices of the vanished passengers, men, women, children, overlapping in panic and pain. "Please let us off. We missed our stop. Open the door. It's dark back here." Raul's whole body locked with terror. The sound was unbearable because it was not theatrical. It was pleading, confused, tired, as if they had been asking for years. The rear doors slammed open on their own. Cold rushed through the bus. The dead surged forward. Raul acted without thinking. He hurled the burning flare down the aisle. It bounced off a seat pole and rolled beneath the standing figures, spitting red sparks. The entire back half of the bus lit up like a wound. The dead recoiled in violent disarray, no longer composed passengers, but panicked bodies. Their forms thinned, warped, split. Water streamed from them in ropes. A man's face tore open down the center like soaked paper. The child in the school sweater scrambled spider-like across seat backs to escape the light, his limbs bending wrong. The transit driver with the broken neck lunged halfway forward and then collapsed into a gush of black fluid that spread across the floor and vanished through cracks that should not have been there. Raul drove through the gap beneath the bridge. The woman remained in the lane until the final second. At the last instant, she did not step aside. She came apart, not struck, unraveled. Her shape shredded into dark ribbons of water and hair that slapped across the windshield. For one blind second, Raul saw nothing but streaming blackness and pale handprints. Then he was through. The bus burst past the bridge and into open road. The speakers went dead. The rear doors slammed shut. For 2 seconds, there was silence except for the engine and Raul's ragged breathing. Then the bus hit something hard enough to throw him against the wheel. A scream tore from behind him. Living voices. Raul looked in the mirror. The regular passengers were back. Not all of them, fewer than before, but enough to fill the front half of the bus. They were crying, clutching poles, looking around in dazed confusion. One woman had blood at her temple. A man crouched over 2 seats, vomiting. The little girl who had warned her mother about the wet people stared straight at Raul with eyes too old for her face. Behind them, the rear half of the bus was charred black around the place where the flare had gone out. Seat fabric smoked. The floor was wet, and in the very back row, untouched by burn marks, sat the woman in the pale blouse. She looked at Raul. For the first time, her eyes were open. They were full of moving water. Raul nearly lost control again. The little girl pointed at the back and began screaming. Passengers turned. Several cried out. One man rushed toward the front, shouting to stop the bus. Another pounded the glass barrier with both fists. Raul couldn't stop. Not there. Not on that road. Not until there were lights, people, anything normal. He drove another 6 blocks and pulled into a gas station lot so hard the bus fishtailed. Passengers shoved toward the doors before he had fully braked. They spilled into the fluorescent-lit lot, sobbing, cursing, crossing themselves, calling relatives, filming on their phones with shaking hands. The cashier inside the station stared through the glass but did not come out. Raul forced himself to stand. His knees almost gave out. He walked halfway down the aisle. The rear half of the bus was empty. No woman, no dead passengers, only the smell of stagnant water and the blackened circle where the flare had burned out beneath the seats. Then he heard a wet clicking sound above him. Slowly, Raul lifted his gaze. On the ceiling near the emergency hatch, something dark and slick clung upside down in the dimness. At first, it looked like a bundle of soaked clothing jammed into the panel. Then it unfolded. The child. The schoolboy's face hung crooked, one eye socket full of moving black water. His fingers had lengthened into thin gripping hooks that pierced the ceiling liner. He opened his mouth wider than his cheeks should allow and whispered in a voice that sounded exactly like Lucia's, "Dad." Raul stumbled backward, hit a seat rail, and fell hard. The child dropped, not down the aisle, not onto the floor, straight into the seat in front of Raul, folding impossibly through solid vinyl as if entering deep water. The cushion swallowed him to the waist, then chest, then face, leaving only 2 small muddy handprints on the torn fabric. Raul scrambled up and ran. He burst from the bus into the gas station lot, gasping like a drowning man. A young passenger grabbed his arm and asked what happened inside. Raul shoved him away without meaning to. He turned toward the bus. The interior lights were out, yet in the dark windows he saw rows of seated silhouettes facing forward, far more than the bus could hold. Police arrived first, then a transit supervisor, then an ambulance no one wanted aboard. Raul tried to explain. He got as far as there was a stop that shouldn't exist before he saw the expressions closing around him like doors. The passengers gave fractured accounts. Smoke in the back, lights flickering, wrong turns, voices on the speakers. Someone claimed a woman had been sitting in the rear seat, then vanished. Another insisted the driver had nearly crashed on purpose. A little girl told a paramedic that the bus was full of drowned people, and her mother slapped a hand over her mouth so fast it looked rehearsed. The transit supervisor inspected the bus and found the electronic route display still stuck on 19. "That's not even one of ours," he muttered. When Raul climbed back aboard with 2 officers and the supervisor, the rear section was empty except for scorched seats and pooled water. But the emergency hatch above had muddy prints around it. Small prints, child-sized. One of the officers asked if there had been a kid on the roof. No one answered. At dawn, the bus was towed to the depot for inspection. Raul sat in a break room wrapped in a gray blanket while paperwork accumulated around him like snowdrifts. He gave statements, repeated himself, left details out when he heard how they sounded aloud. By the time the sky began to pale outside the depot windows, he no longer trusted his own memory of the night. Until Martin arrived. He took one look at Raul and said, "You passed the terminal." Raul lifted his head. "What?" Martin's face was gray with something deeper than fear. "That means it'll follow the route home." The transit authority suspended Raul pending investigation. Officially, the incident was blamed on electrical malfunction, driver fatigue, and smoke inhalation after improper deployment of an emergency flare. Several passengers backed pieces of that version because it was easier. The city liked explanations that fit into forms. The bus was stripped for inspection. Mechanics found corrosion in wires that should not have rusted overnight. The onboard GPS held a gap of 37 minutes where no route data existed. Security cameras from the gas station showed the bus entering the lot at 1:49 a.m., but in the rear windows the footage displayed only darkness. No passengers were visible until after the bus stopped. Then, frame by frame, shapes appeared inside, as if slowly developing on old film. The footage disappeared from the depot server within a day. Raul went home with a doctor's note sedatives he did not take, and the sense that the city had shifted half an inch out of alignment. For 2 days, he barely slept. When he did, he dreamed in the bus's interior geometry, narrow aisle, dim lights, windows full of rain. He dreamed of missing a stop and hearing polite knocking from the back after he checked that no one was there. He dreamed of Lucia sitting in the rear row, wearing the pale blouse, asking why he kept driving past her. He avoided the canal road, but the route followed him in smaller ways. On his apartment building's bulletin board, someone had pinned an outdated transit schedule with Route 19 circled in black marker. At a corner store, the cashier handed him change that included an old transit token. When he looked up, the cashier swore he had not given him any coin at all. One night, Raul woke to hear the stop request bell ringing faintly through his apartment. Ding! A pause. Ding! He searched every room with a kitchen knife in one hand and his phone flashlight in the other. The sound led him finally to the bathroom where the medicine cabinet mirror had fogged over from no heat, no shower, no reason. In the fog, a child had written one word with a finger. Late. Martin visited on the 3rd day. He brought cheap cigarettes and a folder of photocopied news clippings, maintenance reports, and handwritten notes so old the ink had browned. They sat at the kitchen table while traffic noise drifted up from the street below. There were more cases than the depot admitted, Martin said. Not every few weeks, more like every few years. Always after storms, always night routes. Always the same pattern and extra stop passengers that weren't counted drivers losing time. Raul flipped through the papers. A bus photographed under a bridge in 1987. A short article on missing commuters from 1998. An incident report from 2004 mentioning unauthorized stop signage and mass panic event. One handwritten note, likely copied from testimony, read, "They did not force the doors. They waited for permission." "Why does it happen?" Raul asked. Martin shrugged tiredly. "Maybe an accident. Maybe several. Maybe that canal road was built over something older. In this city, you dig for one thing and find 10 centuries staring back at you." Raul kept reading. One clipping described a flooded underpass collapse decades ago that killed a busload of overnight factory workers when water filled the tunnel faster than rescue crews could reach them. Another mentioned a school transport van swept into a drainage culvert during a storm. Different years, same district, same storm season. So many people lost between destinations, between records, between stops. "The first one waits at the curb," Martin said quietly. "She's the invitation. The others don't come unless they think they've been accepted." Raul remembered the woman in the pale blouse, the terrible patience in her posture. Who is she? Martine lit another cigarette. Maybe the first one left behind. The idea settled in the room like soot. Before leaving, Martine took the old token from Raul's table and closed Raul's fingers over it again. Keep it. If it comes back, you'll need to know it's the same route. I don't want it. That doesn't matter. After he left, Raul locked every window and door. That night, Lucia called again. He almost did not answer, afraid of hearing the wrong voice. But it was her warm, tired, slightly teasing. She said she might come by Sunday with pan dulce. She said he sounded sick. She asked if he was taking care of himself. Raul looked at the transit token on his counter and told her not to come this week. Dad, please. Silence. Then softer. What happened? He nearly told her everything. But fear changed shape when it approached someone you loved. He found he could face a blind woman at a phantom stop more easily than the thought of placing that shadow in Lucia's life. Bus trouble, he said. I just need rest. When he hung up, he noticed the token was gone from the counter. He found it an hour later on the floor beside his front door, standing upright on its edge, as if recently set there. The suspension lasted 5 days. On the 6th, dispatch called. Short-staffed. Another driver sick. Could Raul take a temporary day route until the investigation finished? He said no. At 6:12 that evening, Lucia called in tears. Her usual bus had broken down across town after visiting a classmate. Could he pick her up? She was near an unfamiliar industrial stretch with poor service and didn't want to wait alone for a rideshare. Raul was already grabbing his keys before she finished the sentence. He drove through evening traffic with his pulse pounding. Rain had started again, not hard, just enough to silver the windshield and wake every bad memory in his body. Lucia texted him a live location pin that flickered in and out. He followed it east. The neighborhoods thinned into warehouse blocks and concrete walls. Raul's hands went cold on the steering wheel. He knew this district. Not exactly, but in the way of dreams, recognition without wanting it. The canal road ran 2 blocks north. He called Lucia. No answer. He texted. No reply. The location pin refreshed one final time and stopped moving. He turned down a side street lined with dead streetlights and shuttered lots. Ahead, under a single weak yellow lamp, he saw a bus stop sign. His brakes locked so hard the car skidded sideways. The sign stood on a curb where no stop should have been. 19. Beneath it stood Lucia. She was wearing her nursing school jacket backpack slung over one shoulder, hair damp from rain. Relief hit Raul so hard it hurt. Then he saw that she was not alone. A woman in a pale blouse stood directly behind her, with one hand resting gently on Lucia's shoulder. And beyond them, the alley opened into impossible darkness, crowded with waiting figures. Raul threw the car into park and ran. Lucia. She looked up confused, as if waking from concentration. Dad? The woman's hand slid from Lucia's shoulder. Raul reached his daughter, grabbed her by both arms, and pulled her away from the curb. Her skin was icy. She blinked at him, disoriented. What are you doing here? She asked. The bus said. What bus? She frowned. The one that stopped for me. I didn't get on because, I don't know, it didn't feel right. Raul turned. No bus, only the stop sign, the yellow lamp, the woman, and the figures waiting in the alley. The woman smiled at him with closed eyes. Then she spoke in Lucia's voice. You came back on time. Raul shoved Lucia behind him and backed toward the car. The waiting figures in the alley leaned forward together, not stepping out, simply bending with interest, as if a performance were beginning. Among them, Raul saw faces from the bus, the schoolboy, the broken-necked driver, water-swollen riders from other years. But he also saw others now. A nurse in modern scrubs, a man in a delivery jacket, a teenage girl holding a phone with the screen still lit. Recent dead, recent missed stops. He understood then with a depth of horror that nearly stopped his heart. Stop 19 was not just feeding on old accidents. It was still collecting. Lucia whispered, Dad, who are they? Raul felt for his car keys with shaking hands. The old transit token was in the same pocket. His fingers closed around both. The woman at the stop extended one hand, not toward Raul, toward Lucia. Your ride is here, she said. Behind them, Raul's car doors unlocked by themselves with a mechanical click. He turned in disbelief. The dashboard inside the car had lit up. Across the radio display, glowing green in the rain-dark cabin, were 2 digits. 19. The speakers crackled. Then the automated bus voice, clear and female, filled the parked car. Next stop, home, Lucia screamed. Raul shoved her toward the rear passenger side. Get in. She hesitated only a second long enough for the first wet hand to reach from the darkness and grip the stop sign pole with a soft slap. Then another hand appeared. Another. Figures began to emerge from the alley, not rushing, not lurching, just stepping forward with the awful certainty of passengers boarding in order. Raul jammed the token into his fist so hard the metal edge cut his palm. A thought came to him, not logic, not courage, just animal understanding. Stops existed because someone named them. Routes existed because someone accepted them. He looked at the sign, at the painted number at the waiting line, and with a shout that tore his throat raw, he hurled the transit token like a blade. It struck the metal sign with a sharp, ringing crack. For one impossible second, the number on the sign changed. Not physically, more like it slipped. The 19 blurred into meaningless streaks. The yellow lamp burst. Darkness